Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome back to Turner Mobile Detailing. In today's video, we're going to be doing a review on MJJC's Foam Cannon Pro version 2. And we're also going to be comparing it to a very popular and much more expensive foam cannon. Let's do it. Okay, so here we have our box, and right on the front it says new generation, thicker foam, more functions, easier using, bigger capacity, and stabler standing. Now obviously all these claims here on the front are pertaining to the comparison between this being version 2 and the first version of the Foam Cannon Pro from MJJC. Honestly, these claims are very relative, so we're not going to focus too much on that. We're actually going to focus on the foam cannon itself, and we're going to be comparing it to, like I said earlier, a very popular and much more expensive foam cannon competitor. So let's get the box open. It opens from the front, and right away we have our instructions, and they go through various data as to how to use it, some of the technical specs of what it requires out of a pressure washer. You can tell that MJJC is a European-based company because it refers to PSI as primarily bar, which is a European reference to PSI as we know it here in the States. It also says right here that it comes with a 1.1 millimeter Orifice nozzle as a spare. So now here are the parts. I've already opened this package somewhat. Here is the dip tube that goes down into the reservoir. And here are some spare filters for when the filter that's already installed gets clogged. Here's another bag of parts. This is the male end of the foam cannon, which I have not opened this yet. And then here is our orifice. Now, even though it says on it 1.1 millimeter orifice, this is actually the 1.25 millimeter orifice because I've already swapped them out, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. And then we've got our reservoir tank, a 32-ounce reservoir tank, or if you're European, it's about 1,000 milliliter. And then we've got our main component, the piece that actually shoots the foam that sits on top of the reservoir. So let's get all these assembled and see how it looks. Now if you notice in here, that's where the orifice attaches. If you'd like to switch out your orifices from 1.1 to 1.25 millimeter, you just open it up and use a flathead screwdriver. You unscrew that and swap it out with a different size. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our dip tube and we're going to attach it to the underside of the nozzle. Then place it on the reservoir. Like so. And like I said before, we've already got the 1.1 millimeter orifice installed, so the only thing left to do is install the male end of the nozzle. So there it is. As you can see, the assembly was very easy, very pain-free and hassle-free. So if you haven't figured it out already, we're going to be comparing MJJC's new Foam Cannon Pro version 2 with my MTM Hydro PF22, which is also a version 2. And the reason I'm going to be comparing these two models is basically this is the industry standard. It has been for quite a long time. It's very durable. It produces great foam, even in an electric pressure washer like mine, and it's made with very solid construction. So the PF22 is going to set you back anywhere from $90 to about $100. It's pretty expensive, but it is the industry standard. While the MJJC is going to set you back only around $60 to $65. I've seen it as cheap as $50 to $55, and as expensive as around $70 to $75. But MJJC sells it directly from their site at $65 US. Okay, so the first difference between the two is while they both are graduated in milliliters, up to 1,000 milliliters, on the PF22, 1,000 milliliters runs pretty much right to the top of the reservoir. While on the MJJC, 1,000 milliliters is way down here, so you actually have greater capacity out of the MJJC than you do with the PF22. Now, one thing that's always kind of annoyed me with the PF22 is that when you look at the dip tube, there's nothing on the bottom of it. It's just a straight open tube, and it's pretty much allowed to just do whatever it wants within the reservoir. So per se, if I am foaming up a car and I'm pointing it on a downward angle, say I'm foaming a roof or a hood and I need to point downward, and I've only got, say, this much solution left in my reservoir, as I'm pointing downward, that solution is going to fill this bottom corner of the reservoir, while my dip tube may remain up here towards the top of the reservoir, or even in the middle where the solution is running very, very thin, and it's going to severely affect the foam that I get. However, with the MJJC, the dip tube is not only weighted, but it's also filtered. So the advantage of having a weight on the bottom of my dip tube, as you can imagine, if I am foaming at a downward angle and I'm sort of low on solution inside the reservoir, obviously that solution again is going to congregate down towards this bottom corner, and the dip tube, because it's weighted, is going to follow the solution, because gravity works the same way with a weighted dip tube as it does with the liquid inside the reservoir. So therefore, if I am working at a downward angle and I'm low on solution, it's not going to severely affect my foam. So those are 2 points in favor of the MJJC over the PF22. Now, I want to say I'm not sponsored or paid by either one of these companies. As always, you know me, I'm going to give an honest, fair review. I'm going to give you the pros and the cons, the best that I can, so you can make a more informed decision as to what you're going to purchase. So the MJJC along with the PF22, both of them are solidly built, both solid construction. I've been using my PF22 for about a year now, and I've dropped it a handful of times. It's fallen from several feet in the air. It's got a few scuffs, if you can tell, but it still works great. We'll see if the same proves true with the MJJC. One thing that I really like about the PF22 is the adjustment knob here at the top. It's graduated in that it clicks as you turn it from negative all the way back to positive, and each increment is notched so you know where you are, and it doesn't move around very easily and lose your preferred setting. Also, it's got a somewhat short range of turning so that you don't have to sit there and turn it all day to get the amount of foam that you want, or to see what it can do as far as the foam to water dilution ratio. Also, it's labeled with a nice plus and minus so you know exactly what each direction does. Now with the MJJC, it's a lot different. You see, I'm here turning for days and it's not stopping. So to get the kind of desired foam that I want, I've got to just keep turning and turning and turning and turning and turning. And there's no clicking, there's no notching in the dial. So once I get the desired setting that I want, anything could really bump into this dial and move it to where I don't want it. Also, instead of a plus and minus, it's got kind of a fatter line and a thinner line in one direction or the other to designate the foam to water solution ratio, which is understandable, but it's not as clear as it is with the MTM PF22 with the plus and minus sign. So we're going to give this point to the MTM. So another comparison point that really stood out to me is when you're changing the orifice size, or if you'd like to change the orifice size, or if you just like to clean it out and make sure there's nothing in there gunking up your orifice. All you have to do on the MJJC is turn this knob here and you can remove your male end of the nozzle. And that's it. Now with the PF22, in order to access your orifice and to remove the male nozzle, you need actual tools, some kind of wrench, an adjustable wrench, or some channel locks, something to turn this male end out of the center part of the nozzle, which is a pain. This thing does not come out or go in super easy. You can see there's some old Teflon tape there. That does seal the joint, but it doesn't make it any easier to get it in and out. So this is definitely a major point for MJJC. And another little point in favor of the MJJC is that you can actually order this foam cannon with all different types of connectivity. Whether you have a Karcher, a Bosch, or a regular 1/4-inch quick disconnect fitting, you can actually order this foam cannon with the specific appropriate connectivity for your pressure washer. Now, one last point of comparison, which I think is a fairly big one that I wanted to bring out. We're going to go right back to where we started, and that's with the bottle. If you notice on the PF22, at the top of the bottle, there's a nice narrow collar. That way you can grab it, hold onto it that much easier, especially when you're filling it. You can hold it under the water in the sink much easier to grasp. This is a big point. Now at the MJJC, obviously it doesn't have that narrow collar at the top of the bottle. It's just one graduated size from larger at the bottom to slightly narrower at the top, and there's nowhere really to grab up here at the foam cannon's center of gravity. One thing that I can say is that there's these little notches along the bottom edge, the bottom ring of the reservoir that you can easily fit your fingers into. However, if you're going to hold it like this, it's very easily tipped over in your hand. It's not very ergonomic, and I'd say the PF22 has a definite advantage on the ergonomics of the reservoir. Now, the reason why I've already swapped out the orifice inside the MJJC is because I've got a 1.1 millimeter orifice inside the MTM, so I want to compare them apples to apples. First, we're going to see how each one foams using my Adams pressure washer, which produces around 1800 to 2000 psi through a foam cannon, and while using a 1.1 millimeter orifice. And then we're going to swap them back to the 1.25 millimeter orifice and see how they foam then. Now, traditionally, when using an electric pressure washer, you always want to use the smaller orifice because you're not pushing as much pressure from the machine through the foam cannon, so the smaller orifice size will help create that much more pressure and foam out the other end of the foam cannon. But in this case, the MJJC, it says as long as you're using above a certain level of PSI or bar, which in this case, the Adams pressure washer is well above the PSI that MJJC recommends. I believe it's around 1100 to 1200 PSI that they recommend for using the 1.25 millimeter orifice. But we're going to try both and see what we get. We're also going to be trying them out with two different shampoos, something a little bit more on the professional level, something that foams really well. I believe for our first test, we're going to be using Chemical Guys Citrus Washing Gloss, which is known for its great foaming ability. And then we're also going to be trying a more consumer grade shampoo, such as Meguiar's Gold Class. Now, another point of distinction, while I've got the nozzle off, on the MJJC, if you notice, the orifices are brass. This whole fitting is brass. Now, if you've ever worked on a machine that uses water and brass fittings, you know that water loves to corrode brass, makes it much more difficult to use over time. So I can imagine over time, this orifice is going to be very difficult to get in and out of this foam cannon nozzle. Now, on the MTM PF22 version 2, while I'm not going to be taking this male end off to show you because it's just too difficult to take off at the moment, the orifice inside it is stainless. So even after about a year of use, the orifice should be fairly easy to remove and replace. All right, so now that we've gone over a lot of the technical differences and specifications of these two foam cannons, let's get to the part that we've all been waiting for. Let's see how well they foam. Okay, so we've got our two foam cannons ready to go. For our first test, we're going to be using Chemical Guys Citrus Washing Gloss. Now, the MJJC instructions say to use 100 milliliters of solution or detergent paired with 900 milliliters of water. So again, converting to US standard measurements, 100 milliliters converts over to 3.38 ounces. So that's what we did. We put a little over 3 ounces of Chemical Guys Citrus Washing Gloss and the rest with water. And I did the same thing in the PF22 reservoir. So again, on our first test, we're going to be using the 1.1 millimeter orifice. A few more little details that I want to point out about these two foam cannons is that while filling them, I noticed that the wide mouth top on the MJJC, you can see how wide that is much easier to fill. I don't really need a funnel. While the PF22 top, you can see how narrow the top of the reservoir is. You need a funnel, and it's just a little bit more cumbersome to fill the reservoir. Also, I noticed with the MJJC, perhaps because of the consistent graduated shape of the reservoir compared to the truncated shape of the reservoir on the PF22. The MJJC is not as top heavy. It's less prone to tip over even after it's full. Now both foam cannons are fully adjustable. You can see here that I can turn the fan pattern in 360 degrees by turning this red portion of the nozzle. Now it is sort of a hassle to turn, but I can say that that is a little bit of an advantage because once you get it set where you want, it's not as likely to be moved on accident. Now the frontmost part of the nozzle, in this case it's black, changes the width of the fan of foam, just like pretty much any other foam cannon. You can adjust to a very narrow stream or a very wide fan by pinching those blades together. And basically the same thing on the PF22. The advantage I like about the PF22 though is that on the back part of the nozzle, the dial that adjusts the horizontal or vertical aspect of the fan, it clicks in, and if you notice there's these little marks, horizontal or a vertical mark indicator that tells you what fan setting you're on, whether vertical or horizontal. That way you don't have to go looking down the barrel of the gun to see what kind of setting you have. So I really like that feature. And then of course this black part of the nozzle, the end of the nozzle, is used to control the width of the fan itself, whether you want a narrow stream again or a very wide stream or fan. All right, without further ado, let's see how these two foam cannons foam up using Chemical Guy's citrus wash and gloss with a 1.1 millimeter orifice. We'll be testing the MJJC first. Look how nice and thick and rich that foam is from the MJJC. And now our PF22. PF22 foam is also nice and rich and thick and creamy. Not as rich and thick as the MJJC, but still very nice. Okay, so it was kind of a draw. First, I think the MJJC was superior in the foam quality. It produced really thick shaving cream style suds, while the PF22 didn't produce as rich or as thick of a foam as the MJJC did. Now, if you notice in the footage, as the foam weeped down both sides of the car, the MJJC seemed to weep a little bit faster, while the PF22 foam clung to the panel a little bit better. Maybe that's because the MJJC is thicker and thus heavier, so gravity is going to pull it down the panel that much quicker, while the PF22 is a little bit thinner and is going to cling because it's not as heavy. But since this video is mainly about the MJJC Foam Cannon Pro version 2, I'm going to say it produced really nice foam. And what's more, if you do a lot of pre-washing or pre-soaking with foam, you're going to want that foam to weep down off the panel and pull the dirt down off the panel with it, say in about a 3 to 5 minute time period as you let it dwell. So the fact that it wept down off the panel a little bit quicker is not necessarily a bad thing. But you guys tell me what you think, whether you're a pro or you're a weekend warrior. Let me know down in the comments which one you think was the better quality and for what purpose maybe. So now let's move on to our next test. We'll be testing out both these foam cannons using Meguiar's Gold Class, again using a 1.1 millimeter orifice. All right guys, I'm gonna bring you in this afternoon for a little bonus footage. I'm going to show you what some Pearl Auto Shampoo from P&S looks like in the MJJC. Now if you've seen my previous video where I featured this stuff, you can see that video right up here. It really didn't perform all that well on the foam cannon, and a lot of you commented on that video that the foam didn't look all that impressive from the Pearl. However, I want you to see how this stuff performs in the MJJC. It's pretty amazing. Now I'm using 6 ounces of product to about 25-26 ounces of water in my foam cannon, as I normally do no matter what foam cannon I'm using. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that little bonus footage. Now let's head over to the Meguiar's. Okay, welcome to day 2 of our review and comparison of MJJC Foam Cannon Pro version 2. And in today's test, we're going to be using Meguiar's Gold Class. We've got both foam cannon reservoirs filled and diluted properly. Now the MJJC instructions say to use about 100 milliliters, which works out to about 3.38 ounces of soap solution or shampoo. However, you really have to go by the directions on the shampoo or the soap bottle, because every shampoo is made differently. Some are thinner, some are thicker. So you really should go by the instructions from the manufacturer of the soap or the shampoo. So in this case, we're using Meguiar's Gold Class, and on the bottle, under the snow foam option, it says for best results, fill the cannon bottle with a 5-to-1 dilution ratio. So a 5-to-1 dilution ratio, that means 6 parts. So I took 32 ounces divided by 6, and that gives us just under 5.5 ounces of soap solution. So that's what I've done. I took just under 5.5 ounces of Meguiar's Gold Class and put it in my foam cannon reservoirs, and then I filled the rest with water up to the 1,000 milliliter line. And remember, we're still with a 1.1 millimeter orifice. Now another little feature that I'd like to show you today that I think gives the MJJC just a little advantage over the PF22 is the width of the foam blade that it gives you, or potentially gives you if you want it. As I showed you before, the fan width or the foam blade width is adjustable. Now if you close it all the way, that expands your foam blade. And spoiler alert, the MJJC fan blade can get really wide. So I'm going to show you today just how wide it can be in comparison to the PF22. Let's check it out. So even with a shampoo like Meguiar's Gold Class, the MJJC still produces mountains of thick, billowy foam. That foam blade goes wide enough to cover the entire car in one pass. Meguiar's Gold Class performs really well in the PF22 also. Not quite as thick of a foam, but still very nice. Okay, so that'll about do it for our MJJC testing compared to our PF22 using Meguiar's Gold Class. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think both cannons performed really well with the Gold Class, but I have to give a slight edge to the MJJC. I do think it produced a little bit thicker suds than the PF22. So next we're going to go back to the Chemical Guy Citrus Washing Gloss, but this time we're going to swap out the 1.1 millimeter orifice for the 1.25 millimeter orifice and see if it makes a difference, if any. Okay, welcome to day 3. Well, at this point you already know what we're doing, so I won't waste your time explaining it. But we've got our MJJC and we've got our PF22. We've got them both mixed as we did on day one, using just over 3 ounces of Chemical Guys Citrus Wash and Gloss and filling up the reservoir the rest of the way with water up to the 1,000 milliliter line. Now what makes today different than day one is that we've swapped out the 1.1 millimeter orifice in these two foam cannons with a 1.25 millimeter orifice. So we're using the same shampoo, the same ratio of shampoo to water, the same foam cannons. The only difference is the 1.25 millimeter orifice. Will there be a difference? Will the difference even be noticeable? Remember, we're using a 1.4 GSM pressure washer that's putting out about 1800 to 1900 psi to the foam cannon. So let's see how these two foam cannons perform with a 1.25 millimeter orifice. First, the MJJC. Okay, so we let the foam weep for a few minutes to see what kind of dwell time we could get, and they're both pretty much equal on dwell time as far as what I can see. I did notice that the 1.25 millimeter orifice did not produce quite as thick a foam as the 1.1 millimeter. Again though, it's very negligible. Let me know what you guys think below between the 1.1 and 1.25 millimeter orifices using Chemical Guys Citrus Wash and Gloss. Now before we conclude our testing for day 3, there's one little thing that I want to show you between these two foam cannons. A little difference that may not mean a lot to you, but it is a difference and it could produce a slight annoyance one way or the other. If you notice these little red breather holes on top of the reservoir of the MJJC, all foam cannons have breather holes on the top of their reservoirs. That allows the foam cannon to keep the air pressure inside the reservoir at an equal level so that it can pull the soap solution out of the reservoir properly. And in this case, like I showed you before, these little red breather holes, that's where they are on the MJJC. And then on the PF22, there's only one right here, if you can see it right there on top of the brass fitting there. Now the difference here on the PF22 is that if you turn the whole assembly upside down, you can see it leaks out of that breather hole. Now on the MJJC, if you turn it upside down, it does not leak out of those breather holes. So that'll about do it for our day 3 testing of the MJJC Foam Cannon Pro version 2. Again, today we tested Chemical Guys Citrus Wash and Gloss in both foam cannons using 3.38 ounces of solution opposed to the rest of the way water. And the difference today was that we used the 1.25 millimeter orifice opposed to the 1.1. Now let's head over to day 4, where we'll be using Meguiar's Gold Class, and again using the 1.25 millimeter orifice in both cannons. Okay, welcome to day 4, and today we're going to be using Meguiar's Gold Class and our MJJC and our PF22. And again, the same as day 2, I've got these diluted just under 5.5 ounces of solution or shampoo opposed to water. Now again, the only difference between today and day 2 is that today we're using the 2.25 millimeter orifice. Let's see how they foam. First, the MJJC. and now the PF22. Okay, so what do you guys think? In my opinion, the foam from the MJJC with the 2.5 millimeter orifice using Meguiar's Gold Class, the difference between using the 1.1 millimeter orifice from day 2 with the same shampoo, the same dilution ratio, I really didn't see that much of a drop in foam, really if any. Again, you guys let me know what you think in the comments below, if you saw a difference, if you didn't, if you guys think it's worth changing from the 1.25 to the 1.1 millimeter orifice. Just like the instruction says, you really don't need the 1.1, but there's only one way to really find out, and that's what we're doing. The PF22, on the other hand, I really think it faltered changing from the 1.1 to the 1.25 millimeter orifice. Really, the 1.25 is probably meant for gas-powered pressure washers, something that's putting out a lot more pressure than an electric pressure washer. The foam from the PF22 using the 1.25 in Meguiar's Gold Class was a lot thinner than the same combination from the MJJC. So in this test, I definitely have to give the edge to the MJJC. And so far, over all 4 days of testing, the MJJC really has not let me down whatsoever. One more little point of comparison that I wanted to share with you guys is that the connectivity of each nozzle, the male end on the back of each nozzle, the MJJC is much easier to connect than the PF22. On the MJJC, the male end of the nozzle is milled just a hair smaller than that on the PF22, which may not sound like a big deal, but when you're changing connections a lot and you need to work quickly, that's a big deal. See how long it takes me to disconnect and reconnect the MJJC? Super easy. Now when connecting or disconnecting the PF22, I've got to press the foam cannon against my body as leverage in order to get a good grip on the connector and get enough force to get the connector on and off. All right, all that being said, let's head back for some final thoughts. Okay, so I've been using the MJJC now for about 3 weeks, and as you can tell from the previous footage and from a lot of the commentary and the comparisons that we've made between this guy and the PF22, I am absolutely impressed with this foam cannon. While MTM's PF22 is the industry standard and has been for quite a long time, I think the MJJC Foam Cannon Pro version 2 is going to give it a real run for its money. Now, one last little point of comparison that I'd like to point out is that if you notice on the PF22 box right here, the list of included parts, the body or the main nozzle, the suction tube, the bottle, an M22 fitting, a 1/4 inch plug, and a 1.1 millimeter and a 1.25 millimeter orifice. But nowhere does it say any extra filters. That's right, the M22 does not come with any extra filters. In fact, to get an extra filter, which if you use this thing on a professional level and you use it pretty much every day, you're going to have to change your filter out about every 1 to 2 months, depending exactly on how much you use it. So in order to get a new one, you've actually got to send away for it, which can take a while, and as you can imagine, would be a pain in the butt. Now with the MJJC, along with all the parts to obviously assemble the foam cannon itself, it also comes with these guys. 3 little filters. Now 2 of them seem to be of the stainless steel variety, while the other one is of the foam variety. But it's extremely convenient, useful, and thoughtful on the part of MJJC to include these with the original packaging. Again, this is not a major point, but it is a major point of convenience. And one more point, in my opinion, for the MJJC over the PF22. Okay, so that's going to wrap up our review of the MJJC Foam Cannon Pro version 2. And if you haven't been able to tell already, I give this foam cannon my ringing endorsement. I've really enjoyed using it every day for the last few weeks, and I'm going to continue using it every day for the foreseeable future. As always, I'll leave a product link in the description below where you can not only check out the MJJC for yourself, but you can also follow that link if you'd like to make a purchase for yourself. So I really hope you enjoyed this video review of the MJJC Foam Cannon Pro version 2, especially if you are considering purchasing MJJC's second version of their Foam Cannon Pro. And also, I hope it provided some valuable insights while we compared it to the industry standard MTM PF22 version 2. So if you did find this video useful, please don't hesitate to leave us a like right down below. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. That way you don't miss any future auto detailing content, tips and tricks, product demonstrations, and reviews just like this. So as always, I'm Seth with Turner Mobile Detailing, and we'll see you in the next video.